So I'm not really into sitcoms, but I am weirdly a really big fan of Young Sheldon. I never enjoyed Big Bang Theory, or at least the handful of episodes I saw in passing growing up. The humor always felt somewhat derivative and just at the expense of random nerd culture stereotypes. Young Sheldon, though, for what it is quite a smart show that relies on its witty humor about suburban family life and the antics of evangelical Southern families that gives fleshed out stories to mostly two-dimensional characters. The best character in the series is easily Georgie Cooper, Sheldon's older brother. We are aware that Sheldon has a twin sister and older brother in Big Bang Theory, but they kind of just exist as a joke. Isn't it so funny that Sheldon has a really hot sister and a really dumb brother? While Georgie is not book smart like Sheldon, we see in young Sheldon how intelligent and hardworking he is, despite a lot stacked against him. In the beginning of the series, Sheldon is 9 years old, starting high school at the same time as his 14-year-old older brother. Being from such a small Texas town, pretty much everyone knows about Sheldon and the Cooper family. He's known as this really weird, random smart kid that no one knows what to do with. Georgie grew up, because of this, known effectively as the dumb brother. Basically, no adult in Georgie's life really expects him to amount to anything, and this lack of support enforces that idea into Georgie as well, becoming almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're funny bits because, yeah, Georgie is not the smartest in terms of academics, but there are instances, for example, of his dad, George, and the school principal, half joking that he's going to just end up as a teen father and never leave Medford in his life.
You sure you didn't get a girl in trouble? You will at some point, just take it.
He gets pretty much no support academically, and it feels like the adults in his life have effectively given up on the idea of Georgie becoming successful and going off into the world. George and his Mima are still at least somewhat more supportive of Georgie's other strengths at times, but they don't really think this kid's going to get their family out of their tax bracket. They put all of those eggs into Sheldon's basket, who's provided all of the opportunities their family can afford. They don't really understand Sheldon, but they do see that he has a potential that Georgie just apparently doesn't. So he gets all of the attention at home, especially from Mary, their mother. Because of this, Georgie is really left to his own devices most of the time. He doesn't get great grades, really. He skips class and mostly spends his time at school hitting on girls.
It just needs a little shampoo. But check out the best part. Wanna try it out?
His parents don't really care that much about any of his behavior, and he kind of just gets away with it. Mary has absolutely no idea what's going on with her older son's life at any point, while George still at least makes an effort with him. Georgie plays football in the earlier seasons, but this is mostly because George himself is the football coach, and it's something they can do together. You see that Georgie genuinely really values having this time with his dad, where his attention isn't divided between him and Sheldon. There's an episode where Sheldon does end up getting involved with the high school football team because he's really good at using statistics to predict plays, and Georgie just ends up getting overlooked during the whole thing. It's quite literally the one activity that only him and his dad share, and it hurts him in a really different way that's sad to see when he gets sidelined by it. As the series goes on, the Cooper's home life breaks down more and more, and this really takes a toll on Georgie, causing him to just withdraw more from his parents. It's a pattern you actually see a lot in Southern Christian families. Mary was a high school student when her and a then 25-year-old George got together, getting pregnant out of wedlock. They were then essentially forced to get married, as neither abortion or just having a baby without marriage were really an option for them. Having a more traditional conservative background, they fell into their expected familial roles accordingly, George giving up on his dreams and working as a local high school football coach, while Mary became a very religious housewife that finds her escapism from her life in the church. Both of them harbor a lot of resentment over the years for this, and it slowly breaks their marriage down during the mid and latter seasons of Young Sheldon.
Oh, really?
I can just leave.
Did I want to get stuck coaching high school football? Did I want to live across the street from your mother? Did I want to spend my evening getting yelled at by my daughter and my son and my wife?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were so unhappy.
Because you never bothered to ask.
There are regular instances of the kids not being able to sleep because their parents are fighting, or the kids having to stay at their Mima's house because of ongoing arguments at home. You see this dynamic play out often in evangelical households where everything is just kind of swept under the rug because the appearance of a perfect family matters more than the actual household's well-being. Georgie, subsequently, spends much and much less time at home, finding solace with his Mima, who he's always been really close with, and Dale, who's now his boss at the local fishing wear store. He goes to both of them for advice, and there are instances where Georgie even confides in Dale before going to his dad about personal stuff. The fond relationship that Georgie and his dad shared in earlier seasons really erodes as the series goes on, which culminates to the first massive turning point in Georgie's storyline. He ends up dropping out of high school. Georgie had already been skipping class a decent amount to work extra shifts at work, so when confronted by his principal on the matter, he just drops out on the spot. To Georgie, he has pretty much zero confidence in any academic ability and figures that starting to work earlier would give him a step up financially. His parents fight about a lot of different things, but one of the major things is their financial situation, which Georgie vows basically to never repeat. He figures that he'll end up working in customer service and sales anyway, regardless of completing a high school diploma. So for him, it isn't really worth it to spend his time in school when he could be working and saving up. You see this phenomenon occur in children from poorer families, especially the older children who can start working. It seems like the best idea in the short term to earn extra money by dropping out of school, being able to afford your own things, and also lessening your parents' financial burden. However, in the long run, not having a high school diploma really limits your options financially moving upward and creates a cycle of poverty that perpetuates on itself. Luckily for Georgie, it ends up working out years down the line, but you see him really struggle on his way there. It also ends up part of his childhood. George becomes so furious with Georgie for dropping out, he effectively kicks him out of their home. The family creates an arrangement where the garage they have in their backyard is converted into a pseudo bedroom, and Georgie pays rent to his parents to live on their property, but in his own space. While I do agree Georgie's life outside of school allows him to grow as a salesman, like career-wise, he did not need to be a 17-year-old trying to live by himself, working full-time with practically zero parental supervision. Georgie ends up getting fired from the fishing store, but he genuinely needs money now as he's a working adult. This causes him to start working with Mima at her illegal laundromat/gambling business where he meets Mandy. They both end up lying about their ages, Georgie being 17 and he says he's 21, Mandy being 29 but saying she's 25. She doesn't really question his age too much because he's just this guy that works full-time, and she has no reason to suspect he's a teenager. Whatever semblance of childhood Georgie had at that point is completely negated when Mandy gets pregnant. When Georgie tells his parents about Mandy, they freak out, understandably, but they're more sad than anything. There's obviously an initial anger, but George and Mary had been in basically the same situation with Georgie's pregnancy, and they failed him. I'm sure they wanted a better outcome for Georgie and for him to not make the same mistakes that they did, but they genuinely can't be surprised that this happened. No one had been properly taking care of him.
She's 29.
Years old? Oh, what?
According to Suzanne Y. Mellenberg in her book Science and Babies, Private Decisions, Public Dilemmas, teenage pregnancies do not occur in a vacuum. Too often they are the product of economic disadvantage and inadequate educational systems, of poor housing, family instability, and the emotional deprivation associated with it. Because the children of teenage mothers have an even slimmer chance of escaping these conditions, they too may become adolescent parents. The question of marriage also comes up naturally, with Mary urging Georgie and Mandy to get married because the baby would be illegitimate. Mary is preoccupied with how the church would perceive their family. George recognizes the situation for what it actually is, being very adamant that Georgie and Mandy do not get married, presumably to avoid the same situation he's been in the past nearly 20 years.
She's not gonna marry him.
What's wrong with me?
You're an idiot. You're irresponsible. You live in a garage and use a sink as a toilet. Care to jump in?
Georgie takes this news in stride pretty well, though, after the initial shock. I'd have to guess after seeing his parents' dynamic, he wants to be super involved with both the baby and Mandy's life. She initially wants nothing to do with him and plans to raise the baby by herself, again, because he's 17, but she does warm up to him as the series goes on. Despite her rejections, Georgie still makes every effort he can to be a supportive father and baby daddy, which is, I think, what I have to call him because at this point he's not even her boyfriend. Georgie and Mandy have their daughter Constance, who they call Cece, and later actually get married. At this point in the story, Georgie's situation is just kind of normal, like everyone in Medford knows about him dropping out of school and having a baby. He doesn't care that much, especially when it comes to the church community, as he isn't religious himself, but it does mean their family loses a lot of general community support during this time. Despite that, life for the Cooper family in general seems to improve and be on the up, with Sheldon heading off to Caltech soon, George and Mary resolving a lot of their marital issues and renewing their relationship into a new positive path, and George taking a new job of his dream career as a college football coach. Georgie, on the other hand, is 18 now, he's working full-time, bringing in a steady income, and supporting his wife and daughter that he truly loves. He's really building his own little family unit at 18, while his immediate family are on a good patch and expanding out of Medford soon. And then George unexpectedly passes.
He's okay, right?
He's gone.
And this is when Georgie goes from a young adult to being the patriarch, essentially, of his entire family, having to provide for both his wife and daughter, but also his mother and siblings. We know George's passing really breaks the family in a way that they never heal from, which is much sadder that they had been doing so well. Sheldon's analytical, kind of non-emotional processing of his grief causes a further wedge between him and the rest of his family, and with him leaving for Caltech shortly after, he doesn't really process his grief with his family at all. Mary was already very religious to a detrimental extent, but this is when her faith overrides every sense of logic that she has. But this prevents her from actually being present in her children's lives who need her more than ever. Missy's left even more alone than she's ever been in her life, without both her twin and her dad. After George's death, Sheldon finds a family and his friends at Caltech. Mary finds a family at the church and in her faith. Meemaw moves into Dale's place and finds partnership with him. Georgie again lives with his wife and daughter at his in-laws. Missy is left behind in her grief and acts out accordingly, more so for attention, and Georgie becomes her de facto parental figure when she gets herself into trouble. Georgie, at George's casket, told him,
You don't need to worry. I've got everything under control. Won't let you down, Dad.
and he means every bit of it. Georgie is now in charge of not only providing for his own wife and child, he's also basically the sole provider for his grieving siblings and mother. And he had just turned 18 when all of this happened. Georgie is also actively grieving his father, but he isn't really allowed to express that sadness or vulnerability. We see several instances in Georgie and Mandy's first marriage that Georgie regularly visits George's grave just to talk to his dad.
Got it all under control. Yeah. All under control.
He has a dream when he's sick where he just talks to his dad, and he also randomly hugs Jim, his father-in-law and now new boss at the tire store that he works at, because he reminds him of George. Georgie's really in pain more often than not, but isn't really given the space to express that grief himself. I haven't generally enjoyed Georgie and Mandy's first marriage as a spinoff, but there are moments that are more similar in tone to young Sheldon that do really work to show Georgie's life after his dad's passing and all the responsibilities that he has.
I'm stressed out all the time. How'd you do it? How'd you make it look so easy?
In the Thanksgiving episode, Mary initially refuses Georgie's multiple invites to dinner. She ends up making an appearance but leaves early after hearing Mandy's parents arguing because it reminds her too much of George. Georgie then comes up with the idea of taking just him, Mary, and Missy to George's grave and having Thanksgiving all together. It also shows Georgie's immense emotional maturity, putting all of their needs above his. There's another instance when Missy gets suspended and she calls Georgie, instead of her mom, to pick her up. He takes her to George's grave so she can talk it out with him, providing her the space to really discuss what's going on at home in a way that she can't with her mom. Georgie's trying to hold his sister and mother's relationship together, and when he goes home, he gets in an argument with Mandy and his mother-in-law, Audrey, who constantly belittles him despite his best efforts.
This was your idea, wasn't it?
No.
You're always meddling. Mind your own business for once.
This ends up leading to him having a panic attack that takes him to the ER. This kid is stretched really thin, and he ends up suffering in silence most of the time. It isn't super shocking that he's resentful of Sheldon when they're adults in his appearance in Big Bang Theory. Sheldon was obviously just not a great brother for most of the series, but Sheldon is more resentful actually that Sheldon never acknowledged all the sacrifices he made for him, or just that he never thanked him for everything he did. Georgie does love his little brother genuinely, and he supported Sheldon quite a bit financially when he was in school while taking care of the family at home. The brothers have an argument because Sheldon believes that their mom took care of everything once he left because, well, Mary catered to every need and want this kid ever had. In actuality, Georgie was taking care of everyone while Mary was falling apart, and Sheldon never understood how dire the situation was at home.
Mom was a mess. Missy was a dumb teenager. I had to look after both of them.
I talk to Mom all the time. If she was upset, she would have told me.
She was protecting you, you idiot, just like everyone always does.
If things were bad, then why didn't you tell me?
Because I was protecting you too.
I'm not sure how well Georgie and Mandy's first marriage will be. It's very possible the story will continue as they get more seasons. It's also very possible it gets canceled after one. We'll see. We know that Georgie does end up becoming an incredibly successful and wealthy businessman, owning a tire franchise that spans multiple locations across Texas. We also know that Georgie and Mandy end up getting divorced, and he has multiple marriages outside of this, so it isn't to say that he had a smooth road during life. Despite the cards he was dealt, Georgie ends up in a pretty good spot in life. He was never properly supported, the adults in his life failing him and giving up on him, and yet he still rose to fill the responsibilities that he was far too young to have to worry about. I love Georgie Cooper. Obviously, I wouldn't make a whole video about him if I didn't, probably because I have a lot of sympathy for older sibling characters that have to grow up really fast. I was tempted to make a Missy analysis while writing this, so that might be something that I'll do in the future. If anyone has made it this far, thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed. Also, thank you for the positive reception on my first video. I did not expect literally anyone to see that, so I've been really enjoying seeing your comments and engaging with you. So thank you very much.